Okay, so we start a new section of the course module that is mainly on online course design. And I was saying to you, as part of the different technologies that we are asking you to explore, I'm asking people now to be part of the teams in Microsoft Teams that I have created. So there's a space for the unit for people to engage. We can use it as a back channel during our online sessions. You could use it as, as part of asking questions. If at the end of the session there's some thought or question that you have, you could definitely send us a message. And the idea is that you try it out, you see how it works. We will do a couple of sessions in Teams. I would let you know when. It might be week 10, week 11, so that instead of meeting in Zoom, we go to Teams and work there to have a different experience from a different software. I want to see if people here in this room have experience working with Teams, and I want to see some thumbs up or your response on the chat box, or just let me know by unmuting your microphone. Does anyone here have experience working in Teams? Yo. Good. Anyone else in the room? Okay, Kayan. Okay, 1, 2, 3 people. What about the rest? Bai Chen, Li Jing, Yin Wei, Yin Chao. Do you have experience using Teams? No experience. Okay, so it would be a good opportunity then to try it out. We could do that from next week. I will let you know. I will send a message. So that's part of trying out different activities. We will work more with Padlet, and Padlet it's gonna do a really good linkage, because it will help us work collaboratively on your course design. Now, if I jump a little bit to the content of the second bit, I'm just gonna go back and back because I was opening Canvas. I did some adjustments over the break. So we can see the learning outcomes of this module that is number 7. So we will move on then to start creating an online course with somebody else, with our peers. What I am proposing is to continue working in your assignment groups. But if you're fed up with your group and you want to experience working with other people, you could also do that. The idea is that between 3 people are working on the design of one course unit. 3 to 4 people. You could be a pair as well, but the idea is that you're working with somebody else, not solo. Now, if you really feel like you really want to show what you have done in the past, maybe you already have experience creating online courses and you want to show us what you did, or you want to take this opportunity to look back at what you have created in the past and how would you do it differently if you were to use the approaches that and the models that we're going to explore, that is also a good opportunity. And if you and better, if you want to share what you have done in the past with somebody else and work on that for improvements, take that opportunity to do that. I mean, this is the part where you're asked to be creative, to experience and continue experience working collaboratively, and for your own benefit. All of these will feed into your reflections for the assessment or assignment part 2. So in assignment part 2, you are encouraged to think about your own experiences as an online learner in these course units, or you could decide to draw on the experiences as an online course creator, which is what we're going to do in the following 4 weeks, and then talk about that experience in your assignment. So it has the value of, fitting into that second assignment. So basically, what we're doing in these following 4 to 5 weeks is to apply the knowledge that we have in a way, revised and learned in the past 6 weeks, 7 weeks actually, and apply it and put it into practice, designing something. As I said, it could be from scratch, or if you have already worked before on an online course and want to revise it and get the feedback from your peers, that'll be great. So then the idea is that as we're applying that theory, different models, different pedagogies, we are also looking at the affordances of different tools, because as you're asked to think about an online course, you need to think about what kind of digital tools you will be using. So we're asking you again to draw on that experience of analyzing the benefits, the affordances, or the drawbacks or disadvantages of different tools, and then by looking at those two different areas, then deciding what is the most appropriate technologies for your course design and what kind of assessment you're going to implement as well in your online course. So the idea is then that this is just a plan. We're not asking you to develop the whole thing. We're just asking you to plan an outline. And when we say outline, it's basically what you would see. So if you want to see a clear example of what we're asking you to do, this is an outline. You go back to Canvas and look at the topics and timetable page. This is the outline of the online course unit that we are taking. So you see the different modules in the first column. Then you have a second column with topic and description. So what it is that module covers, what topic, and give us a little bit of, information about that topic. We're also going to ask you to include the learning outcomes. So you may have a third column somewhere in the middle here, where you tell us about the learning outcomes of the different modules. Then you could add, what kind of tools you're using, and so on and so forth. But it basically is just these very, small, brief plan of what your potential online course will cover. The details that you're going to add to this type of outline is we're going to discuss them every week. I'll tell you more about these details. If I go back to this bit, okay. So we're starting module 7. How does this unit work? You can always go back to Canvas and read this more carefully. But week 8, we give you an introduction of online course design. We talk about different models for you to use. Now, the idea is here that we use the model that the University of Manchester implements, so that you get to experience what us as tutors go through when we are creating different courses. And this model applies to not only online learning, but also any kind of learning, blended learning or face-to-face learning. We're looking at models for learning design, and usually they are very similar, and they can go across different modes of learning, such as the one that we're doing, online learning, face-to-face, or blended learning. So you get to experience what we experience when we design something and we get feedback and we rework on things. Step 2, which is the one we're going to experience next week, is about storyboarding. But I'll let you know more about this HEL model, because that's the focus of what we want to do for these following 4 weeks. So the idea is that every week we work on a step, and we're doing this collaboratively with other people. Today, week 1 or 8 of the second part of the module, we're going to look at step 1, which is creating learning outcomes. But there you go. Have a look at how these following weeks are going to work. And then if we click next, you will have access now to the different content that introduces different models. But before I start, I want to ask if anyone has any questions so far. Hi, Ulgar, I've just seen you there. Any questions? So hopefully there are people here from, from different groups already, but you do need to let me know if you want to form a different group or you want to work with your same group that you have been working with the last 3-4 weeks, which is your assignment groups. Okay, so let's move on then. And let's start this bit. And remember, all the slides usually have my notes, which you can also access. So we went through the learning outcomes. And that's the idea, that every week we are working on a specific step. Now have a look at week 11 here on my screen. It says at week 11, that's where you're actually being asked to develop the learning material for the one that you're going to present to us. What does this mean? This means that you have 2 options. You could come and join the online seminar so that I send people to work in, as groups, or you can choose working asynchronously that week. So you have 2 options there, and that's up to you. The idea is that you use those 2 hours that we have during the week to working on your actual learning material. So what do I mean when I say learning material? So apart from the outline, which is, what you show is about what the online course unit that you're planning to do will involve or will cover. So you have the module, the different themes that you cover, a description of the themes and the learning outcomes, such as I showed you here on the screen, which is this kind of outline here. Apart from this, we're asking you to develop one learning material. And that learning material could be either, a video, a blog post, an infographic, a podcast. So you decide what learning material. For example, as part of this unit, which we're starting, which is module 7, and I'm just going to go back a little bit. Everything you see here is considered learning material, but we're not asking you to develop the whole course or the whole module, because that's a big task. So what we want to see is one learning material. So if you tell us, I'm going to use Canvas and I'm going to create one page where I introduce my unit, well, we need to see, or what I will expect to see is that specific page, which is this one, for example, where you tell us what the topic of your page is about. We will want to see text. And you could decide to add either links or the video to make your learning material more attractive, or put a picture, or use a Google slide. So that's what we expect to see, but you don't have to do that for the whole outline. You just choose one specific module to illustrate how your online unit would look like. Any questions so far about what, the things that we're asking you to do during these 4 weeks? So you will develop an online course, just an outline, and you just develop one learning material. Any questions? Let me go back to see you there. Okie dokie. Well, questions might arise later on, but that's fine. We can cover that. Right, let's just then start with these different models of how do we design a course. Here you go. One other thing before we get to the models is that if you haven't kept a journal, remember that we asked you to have that reflective journal week by week, where you reflect on your experiences of engaging in online learning. If you for some reason didn't develop that, now this is the time, because remember, this work that you're going to be doing will feed into your assignment part 2. So the idea is that you have different entries every week about what your experiences have been, and what you think about the application of different theories, different models into actually developing something, because then you could focus on that to talk about in your assignment part 2. So the idea is then that every week I'm going to give you different reflective prompts that you reflect on those. The first prompts are these ones. So think about about group work. So basically, because we're working collaboratively, tell us about how does it feel to work with somebody, and as opposed to be working solo or individually. What kind of affordances do you see in group work? What kind of difficulties you experienced, and how did you solve them? What platforms you use to interact with each other? Did you meet in person if you were probably in the same time zone, in the same country, in the same city? Or did you decide to just do everything at a distance? So think about group work. That's the first 4 reflective prompts that I want you to consider for your reflective journal for the second part of the course unit. Now, these prompts are going to increase. I'm going to add more prompts, but the idea is that you reflect on the same prompts plus the ones I'm going to ask you to reflect on every week, so that you develop that journaling process. And let's get started then. Today, we're going to cover 4 points. So we're going to look at learning design models. I'm going to signpost you to different resources as well, different online learning materials for you to explore individually, but also I'm going to give you an introduction of every module, model. Then we're going to look specifically at the HEL model that we use in the humanities department of the University of Manchester. As I said to you, the idea is that you get a sense and experience what different lecturers and people who teach in different courses go through when they plan and then implement a course unit. We look at other aspects that we have reviewed in the past, but how they're also important and how they will feed into the process of developing your online course. And then we will move on to group work. So that's the expectation, is that by 11 o'clock, you use most of the hour to start generating your ideas about, what it is that you're going to cover or want to do about to create this online course. If we start then with the models, I'm just going to, 1 second, there you go. We have different models. So if you do a quick search in Google Scholar and you type learning design models for online teaching and learning, you will have a series of different models. What I like about these different models is that some of them are complex in a way, but in a good way, because they ask people to be very particular and to be really thoughtful about the process of creating things. And we know that if you are a tutor, if you're a lecturer, if you have taught before, you really need to think about the process of teaching and how you want your module to look like. And we're always constantly thinking about students. What I also like about these models is that they are all very similar in that they cover the main steps. So from the thinking process, which is, okay, what do I want my students to be able to achieve, to implementing what they design and then getting feedback to then improve the unit. So if you remember, what we do at this university is that after we teach, we ask students to give feedback about the different units. And we use that feedback in order to make changes and to improve the content and the methods of teaching as well. So any feedback that you give, that is part of the model of designing a learning course. That's what is important. And that's why we emphasize it a lot when the time period comes, and please give us feedback because otherwise we don't know what we're doing well, what we can improve. So one of the models that might come up in your search is the ADDIE model. Now the ADDIE model, it's called ADDIE because it has 5 stages. It looks like a waterfall. It gives us the impression that it is a linear process, but in reality is messier than that, because as we are moving or creating stages, we always go back and revisit what we have done. And that's just natural in the cognitive process. We kind of tend to get back to the ideas that we have developed and see the coherence of them. So analysis, A, D for design, second D for development, I for implementation, and E for evaluation. So the ADDIE model. So it starts with the analysis. What do we analyze? Usually is an analysis of the needs, of what we want our students to be able to achieve. We look at learning outcomes, and that's where every model starts, learning outcomes, writing up those aims that we want to achieve with that unit. What do we want to teach? Why and how? That's when we get to the design. So what do we want to teach? How we're going to teach it? What kind of online tools we're going to use it? To then move on to the development. Okay, so you have thought about how you would do it, but now how it would look like. So you actually need to put your thought into practice and develop your online units. So if you're using Blackboard, this is where you start putting up the materials there, putting up the readings, putting up the videos, putting up the links, putting up everything that you need for students to be able to see that module come to reality. Then obviously it gets to the time where you open up your module, you get students, you implement what you thought, the process of the activities week by week and so on, to the end of your module. When you collect feedback, you ask students for feedback, comments, and then you rethink about what went well, what you could improve, what kind of changes you're going to make. And it's interesting that I'm saying this because at the moment, all of the lecturers at the university, specifically from our department, which is the education department, we're going through a revision of our different online courses and face-to-face courses and blended learning courses. Because we take feedback very seriously, and we want to make, to refresh things. And as I said to you, this is a collaborative process. I'm not working by myself on my units. I'm usually working with other people, showing what I think about my designs, trying out different activities with people and getting feedback. And when I say people, I usually involve older lecturers, people I co-teach with, and students if I have them handy. So that's the important thing about the ADDIE model. Then we have the Assure model, which it kind of has one more stage, but that's because this model is breaking down things, the steps a little bit more. So we start from the, needs analysis. And what do I mean by a needs analysis? We look at the feedback. We actually start from feedback from students. I could think about a unit and ask students, if you had the opportunity to access to this unit that is about X, Y, and Z, would you be interested in attending this unit? And that's how you can get feedback from a unit that doesn't exist, but you kind of pitch the idea, tell us what the unit is about, then think about what learners would like to see in that unit. You get feedback from people, from these students that might be your potential learners in the future. And then you get, that information, and then you use it in order to start developing your idea. So once you get that feedback, what we call needs analysis, we can then move on to developing the objectives or the learning outcomes. That's how we call them at the University of Manchester, intended learning outcomes. So what do you want to achieve with this unit? What do you want your students to be able to do? And then we start thinking about the different materials and resources that you need. And you have two stages here. So you select media and materials, but you also need to utilize it. What do we mean by utilize it? So after you select and look at the pros and cons, and then decide what you want to utilize. In this case, for this unit, we're not using Blackboard, we're using Canvas. So it has its advantages, but also it may have different challenges. So I've used it. Now, once that I have asked students to engage with, this is when, towards the end of the implementation process, we get that feedback. So we spend some time utilizing the materials and see how they work. And that's the same, and that's true for our unit. So when I'm asking you that, to try VoiceThread, for example, and that you have used it, you might have now an idea about how VoiceThread works, and you might, you might give me feedback. You have actually, some people have put feedback in the online discussions. I've read, for instance, that some people have preferred to use Canvas over other virtual learning environments, and so on and so forth. So in a way, as part of the reflective process, and when we engage in the different online discussions, sometimes I get, that feedback that I need, and I put that feedback throughout the unit, not just at the end, because as students experience different things, it's important to then, get that information. Is it working? Is it something for you? Let us know so that we can, adjust, rethink, or improve, or continue using these, tools that are useful to students. Then we move into that, required learner participation. Again, that is part of the implementation of the materials, engagement, getting feedback from students, to then evaluate the whole unit, from the planning process to the implementation, and let's look at what happened. That's a reflective mode when we evaluate and revise. There's always the opportunity to revise and make changes. And as you can see, it's very similar to the previous model. It's just that the stages might look different, but it's because of how these stages are broken down. Then we have the ABC, or the Arena Blended and Connected model. This model was created by Diana. I think her surname is Lorliat, but
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm thinking, I don't know how to pronounce his name. Diana Laurillard.
I can't also. Yeah.
It's a bit difficult. And my Spanish always comes in my mind. So I would say Diana Laurillard. So, the name sounds a bit different in both in different languages. But this is a model that is based on conversational framework. And so what does this mean? So she took 6 specific learning types, only 6. She explains her rationale about why she did that. So in our Google Slides, you have different links on the next slide here. You have a blog, which is one learning material. You have a video to look at, about this ABC method, and then you have a PDF. So I'll show you. This is the blog here that was created by Diana or Diane herself. And in this blog, she explains that's her, by the way. She explains why she chose these 6 different learning types, and how you can engage in the process of, developing a unit, following the steps that she's designed. It is interesting to read. I'll tell you more about the model, but this is one resource that you can access and look at if you are interested in how she thinks about the learning design. So the 6 types she chose to focus on are, let me see. Where I was. Okay, so that's a blog, that's a video. Where's the video? Yeah, there's another video there that actually takes us through the process. So you see in this video, people, actual teachers, thinking about the units, and you will see that they're not working by themselves, they're working with other people. Because it is important to bounce off ideas and think about, okay, sometimes we have just a very, tunnel vision about how things should be, but getting the perspective of other people we can cover different elements. So that video is just 4 minutes, and it tells you, how students engage with this model. What else have I put? Then we have this PDF, which should be, I'm not sure if I have it open. Yeah, it's that one PDF. That's another learning material that this was a presentation I attended a long time ago, where we were different tutors in that session, and we were asked to do different activities, either to read and then think about the readings and think about our units that we wanted to design. And after different activities, we looked at the video. That video is actual this one. So that then we started our own learning design process. So this was a basic 90-minute session when we were asked to think about an online course, to think about tweeting this course. So if you use Twitter, you know that Twitter only has 140 words for you to use. So it's very limited about what you can write. And if you think about how would you describe the unit that you have in mind in 140 words, no more, no less, use only 140 words and describe that unit. So that's how we started thinking about online design, thinking about the unit. What would be my unit about? I need to describe it in 140 words. Then you use a graph, which is this one here, that looks at different learning types. And as I said, Diane, she chose 6 learning types because she believes that when we interact, when we start that learning process with content materials, with people, we go through different learning types called acquisition, collaboration, discussion, investigation, practice, and production. So acquisition is all about everything that you read, that you listen to, you are engaging with information, you're processing information, therefore you are acquiring specific knowledge. Now, what she thinks is that when we are listening to a video, when we're reading materials, sometimes we are very passive. Yeah, we might not be doing much. That also depends on the design of the activity. If I ask people to watch a video, I usually say, take notes or think about this question to respond to. So I give people something to do. But if we speak generally, and how Diane thinks is that we're most of the time very passive, just reading content, listening to content. But that doesn't make it very, or less valuable. It makes it actually a valuable experience because the person is internalizing information. So a video, a reading, a PowerPoint, a Google slide, it is important to have that kind of content in your course. But it's not everything. You also need to think about collaborative tasks. So that is when students start talking to other people, exchanging ideas, sharing information, sharing experience. Or discussion tasks where people focus on solving a problem or articulating their ideas about a specific topic. And she also thinks that people investigate. So if I say to you that we're going to look at a specific topic, the idea is that you go away, you go to the library, you read about that topic, or if not the library, because we're doing an online course, then I may give you access to these different learning materials. So you have access to a PDF, to a blog, such as I put it here in the slide, a blog, a video, PDF, and then you might do an exploration in your own time. And then we'll practice things. So again, it's the idea that students are not just passive, they are doing things. So in an online course, you want students to create things, to put a post, to share information, to engage in group work, and so on and so forth, and to produce something. At the end of the day, a lot of the assessment practices that we have when we engage in different courses is that we're asking students to produce something. In your case, for instance, in this online course, you have 2 different assignments, and that's your knowledge production. So you're telling us about what you learned, why, how, and what would you do next with this learning process, or what with your learnings that you have. So you could look at, the different examples of how people start the design process. So these are set materials. So this is a training course. This was a workshop where the people who delivered this workshop came with all these papers. And they started, telling us to form groups. And here are the different, flashcards where you need to work on and make notes. So you see here, there's a paper here where we looked at with information such as what's the name of your course, how many students do you think you will have in that course, what kind of learning types or activities are you planning for that course to have. So this map here, this is where you think, if my unit has a lot of input information such as videos and readings and so on, then that means that it's a high in a way that you need to kind of graph, put a circle of where you think your unit materials are. But let's say that you're a very traditional teacher and you don't have many materials available, so you, instead of putting the little mark down here, you put it a bit lower there. You need to graph where your learning type activities are. So if your unit has a lot of the group discussion, which this unit doesn't, we can see that it's very, very low. So the closer to the center is very, very little of things that you have, but the more distance you have between the center and where this arrow is, that means that you have a lot of that. That means in this graph that there are not many discussions. However, we can see that acquisition and production students are asked to do more things. So that's like halfway through. In a way, we're mapping how many, think about the activities in your online course that you have in mind. How many acquisition would you have? And what I mean by acquisition is, that kind of input materials. Are you asking your students to do a lot of collaborative tasks and so on and so forth? Do you kind of map out this? And then you have this diagram at the end of the session. But also you go deep into the activities. So if we're talking about practice or the learning type practice, we had this flashcard here when we were asked to pick, are you asking if you have a face-to-face classroom, are you taking your students to a field trip? Or are they doing some kind of face-to-face role? So whatever you think that your unit could have, you could tick. And the more things you tick, you need to think about how you organize them as well. So you have there the practice. The idea is that students are doing things using, you have some examples here. If you have an online class, are they engaging in, virtual labs or online collaborations, plays, and so on and so on. And they gave you space, these flashcards, because obviously these are just some ideas, but you may have other ideas that relate to practice. If you are thinking about, there's another example there, let me think. If you're thinking about acquisition, so does your unit have reading books, papers? Are they going to listen to podcasts? Do you have videos? Do you have websites? What kind of materials do you have? And you can pick or add. Again, if your unit has investigation, which means that you're asking students to search for information, analyze, compare data, evaluate, then you pick whatever it is that your unit has or add on if that doesn't come in that flashcard. The same for discussion. What kind of discussion are you thinking about to add for your unit? And what kind of collaborations? And again, we go back to the practice, which is something we've seen before. And then production, what are you asking your students to develop? Are they going to write an essay, report on something, that they're going to write an account? Are they going to, develop a video? What is that they are creating in your unit to show and demonstrate that they have learned something? Again, you can visit all of these materials and really look into the details and potentially, look at the examples. What I like about this PowerPoint presentation, which now is a PDF, is that it takes you through the different processes, different steps that you need to do in order to develop your unit. So that is the ABC method. And this example here is an example from a project I created, which is still running at the University of Manchester. And it's just, this is an online module where students come and reflect on their research experiences. So if you want to look at, what I wrote for each one of the learning types and what kind of content students engage with, that's one example that you can look at in your own time. Then we have talked about this model, which is Salmon's model of e-learning or online learning. And that model, if you remember very well, has 5 steps. And the idea is that all of the steps communicate to one another. As I said, in reality, the process of creating something is not just linear. It's messier than that, because you need to go back and forward and back and forward. So from access and motivation to online socialization to information exchange, knowledge construction or knowledge production, and then developing something. So the idea is that this is a student-centered model, and that you are constantly, asking students to interact, to read information, to exchange ideas, to work together, to create something and to present something, to develop something that they have, where they demonstrate what they have learned. I'm gonna pause there because I have a chat going here. Yes, thank you, Yo-Yo, for sharing the materials. Is it only for online courses or can it? Yes, so all of the models, ABC, Assure, the ADDIE model, even this one, which is precisely designed by Salmon, who's an expert in online learning, can be utilized for both face-to-face online learning and also blended learning. Then we have the Carpe Diem. I'm not sure you can see very well that image, but there's a link again. I like to put more information, more learning materials. And when you click on that link, you will access to this PDF, which is a bit long, about 29 pages. But again, what I like about this model is, or this material, is that it takes you through step by step. What do you need to do first, second, then, to start thinking about that online course unit? So the Carpe Diem model tells us, that's the image that I was trying to show on the Google slide. I hope you can see them a bit better. So it has 4 stages. So again, this is not a big model in the sense that the stages are less, 4, but still cover a lot of the process, which is creating, implementing, and evaluating. So the first step is blueprint, which this is again the thinking step, where tutors and lecturers are asked to think about what the purpose of the unit is. Then we ask them to storyboard. So, okay, if your unit has 8 modules, how many weeks are in that module? What are the purposes, the weekly purposes for each session that you're going to cover? What kind of materials you're going to be using? What kind of activities you're going to be using? So we go back into the nitty-gritty. We talk about activities, materials, sequence of sessions, and so on and so forth, to then build a prototype, which is actually developing that material, that course, putting it either on Canvas or Perusal or Blackboard or any, Articulate 360. So where do you put it? How does it look like? That's the important thing, that you get to build the prototype and then have a reality check, which is basically you implement it, you get feedback, and then, there's actually 6 stages actually. You review whatever, you take that feedback, you review your unit, make adjustments, and then think about what's going to happen next. Usually this step, plan your next step, is to start from the beginning. Are you making any changes to your blueprint, to your storyboard? Are you making any changes to the actual unit? Are you going to add more materials, remove sections? I don't know. That's part of the adjustment process. And then implement it again. And this is just a cycle. This is a spiral, I would say, where you develop, implement, evaluate, and you start all over again. So far, those are the models, Carpe Diem. And there's a video that you can find again in Blackboard. That video gives you a summary of the models. This video was created by Helen Perkins. She came to this unit and gave us this chat because she is an expert, a technologist, and she helps lecturers to create and think about the process of creating a course, either face-to-face or blended learning or online learning. And they provide that support. Again, the idea is that you're not working by yourself. You are constantly looking at different perspectives, and therefore adding those ideas into your module design. I just put some, basically the same information that you've seen in here, just for you to see perhaps a bit clearer, because not always in the Google Slides are, the images are clear. But that's those are the resources that you can visit to look at these different models of online learning and learning design that can be used for different online sessions, online courses, face-to-face, and blended learning as well. Now we're gonna take a break, 5-minute break, because we're gonna go into the learning outcomes, which is the first step of the HELD model, which I'm going to explain to you next. As we go, we'll take 5 minutes. Is that okay? Okay. And then we'll see you 11:05. Is that okay? Sure. Excellent. See you soon.